I'm sorry. I didn't mean to burden you.
It's all right, you're not alone. It's okay. I'm here.
소영아.
The plane shuddered through the night sky 35,000 feet above the South China Sea, and Ifdao Adelani froze the second she felt the weight settle onto her shoulder. She did not turn her head. She did not breathe, because the head that had just dropped against her collarbone belonged to Ryu Sakajin, the man Forbes Asia called the iceberg of Seoul, the man whose own board members trembled when he walked into a room, the man who, only 9 hours earlier, had looked at her across a conference table in Gangnam and said in flawless English, "Do not speak to me unless I speak to you first." And yet here he was, on a red-eye flight to Lagos, his black hair pressed against her shoulder, his breath warm and slow against her neck, and a single tear, just one, sliding silently from his closed eye down the bridge of his perfectly carved nose. The flight attendant who walked past with the water cart stopped so suddenly the bottles rattled. Her mouth fell open. She raised her hand to cover it. She looked at Ifdao with eyes that said, "Do something, move him, wake him, this cannot be happening." But Ifdao did not move. Because in that moment, watching that single tear travel down the face of the coldest man in the Korean tech empire, she understood something the entire world had spent 20 years trying to figure out. Ryu Sayako Jin was not made of ice. Ryu Sushu Jin was made of something that had been frozen on purpose, by someone, for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it had just cracked open 35,000 feet above the ocean, on the shoulder of a Nigerian translator he had hired 3 days ago and had not once looked in the eye. She felt his hand twitch in his sleep. She heard him whisper a name, not in Korean, not in English, but in a language she had not heard since her grandmother died. He whispered the name in Igbo, and that name, that single name, was the name of a boy who, in 12 hours' time, was going to be the most hunted child in Lagos. If you are watching this right now, and your stomach just dropped, do this one thing for me before we go any further. Tap that subscribe button. Hit the little bell beside it. Drop a comment that just says, "I'm here for the whole ride." Because what you are about to witness in the next 60 minutes is not just a story, it is a reckoning, and the algorithm only shows it to the people who tell it to keep showing them. So lock in with me, tell the people in your life to come watch this with you, and let us begin. Now to understand what happened on that plane, you have to go back. You have to understand who Ifdao Adelani was before that flight, and who Ryu Sak Jin became before he ever met her. Because the woman who let a stranger weep on her shoulder at 35,000 feet was not soft. She was the daughter of a market trader in Ibadan who had buried her mother at 15 and her dreams at 19 and her pride more times than she could count. She was the girl who had learned Korean from a battered library textbook because a scholarship application asked her to list a third language, and she did not want to lie. She was the woman who, at 28, had 3 university degrees and 1 bank account that had been overdrawn for the better part of a year, and the man whose head was on her shoulder was not weak. He was the boy whose mother had been found dead in a bathtub the morning of his 12th birthday, the teenager who had been beaten with a leather belt by his father for crying at the funeral, the man who had built the 3rd largest tech conglomerate in East Asia by the time he was 34, and the CEO who had not, by any official record, smiled in public for 11 years. 2 people who should never have crossed paths were now sharing a cabin, sharing a silence, and about to share a secret that would burn down an empire. 3 days earlier, Ifdao had been sitting in her one-room apartment in the Itaewon district of Seoul, eating instant noodles out of the pot, because she had not been able to afford a proper bowl since the last one cracked in November. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. She almost did not answer. The number had no name. But something in her, the same something that had pushed her onto a plane out of Lagos with 2 suitcases and a scholarship letter 6 years ago, told her to pick it up. The voice on the other end was a man, Korean, clipped, formal. "Miss Adelani, my name is Director Ha. I represent the office of the chairman of Sunwa Holdings. We have a position. It is short-term, 72 hours. The compensation is 40 million won. Ifadeo set down her chopsticks. 40 million won was more money than she had earned in the entire previous year. She heard herself ask, "What is the work?" "Translation," the man said. "Korean to English, Korean to Yoruba, Korean to Igbo. You are one of only 3 certified translators in the country with that combination. What is the subject matter?" There was a long pause. "That will be disclosed upon signing the non-disclosure agreement. A car will be at your building in 40 minutes. She wore her best blouse, the one with the small ink stain on the cuff that she had tried for 3 years to wash out. She sat in the back of a black sedan that smelled like new leather and old money. She was driven to a tower in Gangnam so tall it disappeared into the clouds. She was taken up an elevator that had no buttons, only a slot for a black keycard. And she was shown into a conference room where 7 men in identical charcoal suits sat around a table the size of her entire apartment. At the head of the table sat a man she recognized only from magazine covers, Ryu Sok-jin. He did not stand when she entered. He did not offer his hand. He did not even fully look at her. He read from a tablet in front of him and said, in a voice as flat as a sheet of glass, "Miss Adelani, you will accompany me to Lagos on Friday evening. You will translate every document and every conversation I require you to translate. You will not ask questions. You will not record. You will not speak to the press. You will not speak to anyone outside this room about the existence of this trip. If any of these conditions are violated, you will be sued for an amount that will follow you to your grave. Do you understand?" Ifadeo looked at the contract that had been slid across the table to her. Her hands wanted to shake. She did not let them. She picked up the pen, she signed, and as she signed, she felt his eyes on her for the first time, just a flicker, just a second. But in that second, she saw something behind the ice that did not match the man everyone said he was. She saw exhaustion. She saw grief. She saw a man who was about to do something he was terrified of. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that 24 hours earlier, in a small house in the Yaba district of Lagos, a 9-year-old boy named Tobuchai Akwosa had asked his great-aunt the same question he had been asking for as long as he could speak. "Auntie, who was my father?" And his great-aunt, a woman named Mama Ngozi, who had raised the boy since the day his mother Adeze died in a botched cesarean section in a Lagos hospital, had finally opened the drawer beside her bed, pulled out a photograph she had hidden for 9 years, and placed it on the table in front of the boy. The photograph showed his mother, young and laughing, standing in front of a coffee shop in Boston with a tall, serious-looking Korean man whose hand was on the small of her back. Tobuchai stared at the photograph. He touched the man's face with one finger. He whispered, and Mama Ngozi, with tears running freely down her face, said, "Yes, my son, he is real, and in 3 days he is coming to find you." But this is where the story turns. Because someone else, 6,000 miles away, knew Tobuchai existed too. And that someone had been waiting 9 years to use him. Seokajin's half-brother was named Ryu Min-kyeol. He was 31 years old, the son of Seokjin's father by his second wife, a woman named Mrs. Han, who had married into the family 2 years after Seokjin's mother had been found dead in her bathtub. Min-kyeol ran the International Acquisitions Division of Sunhwa Holdings. He had the corner office on the 42nd floor. He had the second largest stake in the company after his brother, and he had spent his entire adult life waiting for his brother to make one mistake, just one, big enough to seize control of the empire. For a long time he had given up hope. Seokjin made no mistakes. He had no vices. He had no scandals. He had no lovers. He had no friends. He had no weaknesses. And then, 6 months ago, Min-kyeol had received a phone call from a private investigator in Manila who had been hired, years ago, by Seokjin's late mother's best friend, a woman named Mrs. Ju, to find out what had happened to the Nigerian girl Seokjin had loved in college. The girl Seokjin's father had paid off to disappear. The girl who had not, in fact, taken the money. The girl who had gone home to Lagos pregnant. The girl who had died giving birth to a boy. The investigator had finally found the boy. He had taken photographs. He had filed his report. And Mrs. Ju, who was now 78 years old and dying of lung cancer, had finally decided to break a promise she had made to a dead woman and tell Seokjin he had a son. But she had made one terrible mistake. She had told the wrong assistant. And that assistant had been on Min Kyol's payroll for 6 years. Min Kyol had read the report 3 times. Then he had smiled for the first time in months. Then he had picked up his phone and called a man in Lagos who owed him a great deal of money. And he had said, very quietly, "I want you to find a boy named Tobechi. I want you to wait, and when I tell you, I want you to take him." So on that night, on that plane, when Ryu Sachin let his exhausted head fall onto Ifdayo Adelani's shoulder and whispered the name Tobichai in his sleep, 3 things were happening at the same time, in 3 different parts of the world, and none of them knew about each other. In Seoul, in a private hospital room, Mrs. Ju was dying, and she was praying that the boy she had told Sachin about would be safe. In Lagos, in a small house in Yaba, a 9-year-old boy was lying awake staring at a photograph of a father he had never met, counting the hours until morning. And in a conference room on the 42nd floor of Sunhwa Tower, Min Kyol was looking at a satellite map of the route his brother's private jet was taking, smiling, and waiting for the signal to begin. The plane began its descent at 4:17 in the morning, Lagos time. The sky outside the windows was turning the color of bruised peaches. Ifedeo had not slept. She had not been able to, because the man whose head was on her shoulder had stayed there for nearly 5 hours, and every time she had tried to gently shift him, he had murmured something in his sleep that made her stop. He had whispered, "I am sorry, I did not know, I am sorry." He had whispered it in Korean. He had whispered it in English. And once, just once, he had whispered it in a language she had only heard her grandmother speak, a language she had no business hearing from the lips of a Korean CEO, a language called Igbo, and he had whispered a name attached to it. He had whispered, "Adeze, I am sorry, I did not know, I would have come." When the captain's voice came through the cabin announcing the descent, Sok-jin jerked awake. For 1 second, just one, his eyes met hers, and she saw the panic flash across his face as he realized where his head had been. He sat up so fast he hit his elbow on the armrest. He did not apologize. He did not look at her. He stood up, walked to the back of the cabin where the small bathroom was, and stayed in there for 15 minutes. When he came out, his face was washed, his hair was combed, and the mask was back on. He sat down across the aisle from her this time. He pretended she did not exist. And Ifdayo, looking at the back of his perfectly straight neck, thought to herself, "I have just seen something that nobody on earth has ever seen, and if I am smart, I will pretend I did not see it, and I will collect my 40 million won, and I will go home, and I will forget this man's name." But Ifdayo had never been good at being smart in that particular way. So instead, very quietly, she leaned across the aisle, and she said in a voice that only he could hear, "Who is Adize?" His head snapped toward her so fast she heard the bones in his neck crack. His face went the color of paper, his mouth opened. Nothing came out. For 10 full seconds, the most powerful man in Korean tech could not produce a single word. Then he closed his mouth. He turned away, and he said, in a voice that shook for the first time since she had met him, "If you ever say that name again, I will end your career, your family's name, and your ability to ever set foot in either of our countries again. Do you understand me?" Ifedeo did not flinch. She held his eyes. And she said, "I understand, but I think you should know. You said it first, in your sleep, on my shoulder, and you said you were sorry." The plane touched down. The cabin door opened. 2 black SUVs were waiting on the tarmac. Soko-jin walked off the plane without looking back at her. Ifdayo gathered her bag, her papers, her dignity, and followed. What she did not see, what she could not have seen, was the 3rd black SUV parked a quarter-mile away, with tinted windows and a man inside speaking quietly into a phone in Yoruba, saying, "He has landed. The translator is with him. We move at noon." The first meeting was at 9 in the morning at a hotel in Victoria Island, an empty conference room with bottled water and a thin assistant from the Lagos office who looked as terrified of Soo-kyu-jin as everyone in Seoul had been. The official agenda was the acquisition of a solar tech startup called Kuro Energy. Sok-jin sat at the table. He read documents in Korean. He asked Ifedeo to translate 3 contracts from English to Korean. He did not look at her once. At 10:30, his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something in his face shifted, just slightly. He stood. He walked to the corner of the room. He spoke for 2 minutes in Korean, low and fast. He hung up. He came back. He sat down. He said to the assistant, "Cancel the rest of the day's meetings, reschedule for tomorrow. I have a personal matter to attend to." The assistant stared at him as if he had just announced he was running for governor. In 9 years of working for Sunhwa, the assistant had never once heard the chairman use the words personal matter. Seokjin turned to Ifdayo. For the first time in 3 days, he looked her fully in the eye. He said, "You will come with me." She said, "Where?" He said, "Yaba, to meet someone." She said, "Why do you need a translator? The boy speaks English." She said it without thinking. The words came out before her brain caught up to them, and she watched, in real time, as Ryu Seok-in understood that she had figured it out. His jaw tightened. His hand, resting on the table, curled slowly into a fist. He said, very softly, "How do you know it is a boy?" She said, "Because you said his name in your sleep, Tobchai, and I have a cousin in Owerri with the same name. It means God's praise, and you said Adize too, and in Igbo, Adize means the king's daughter, and I am guessing she was someone you loved, and I am guessing she did not tell you she was carrying your child, and I am guessing that is why you have not slept in 3 days." There was a silence in the conference room so deep, she could hear the air conditioner cycling on the wall. Seok-jin lowered his head. He pressed his fingers against his temples. And for the second time in 12 hours, this man who had not cried in public in 11 years felt a tear roll down his face. He did not wipe it away. He said, in a voice so quiet she almost missed it. "I have a son. He is 9 years old. His mother is dead. I did not know he existed until 3 weeks ago, and I am about to meet him for the first time, and I am terrified, and I do not know what to say to him, and that is why I need you, not to translate words, to translate me." Ifedio Adelani, who had spent 28 years building walls around her own heart so that no one could ever leave her again the way her mother had, felt one of those walls crumble. She reached across the table. She put her hand, just for a moment, on top of his fist. She said, "Then we go, and I will help you, not because you are paying May, but because that little boy has been waiting his whole life for this moment, and he deserves a father who shows up. So we go, now. If this story is hitting you somewhere deep, somewhere you did not expect, I need you to do something for me right now. Look down at the like button. Tap it. Just tap it once. Because every single tap tells the algorithm that this story matters, that this story deserves to reach the next person who needs to hear it. And then come back, because the next 40 minutes are about to take you somewhere you cannot predict. The drive from Victoria Island to Yaba took 1 hour and 20 minutes. The traffic on 3rd Mainland Bridge was its usual symphony of horns and exhaust. Seok-jin sat in the back of the SUV next to Ifdayo. He had not spoken since the hotel. He held a small wrapped gift in his lap. Ifedayo had asked him what was inside. He had said, "A music box. My mother gave it to me when I was 8. It is the only thing of hers I still have. I am giving it to him." Ifedayo looked at the small box in his hands and understood, for the first time, how heavy a single object could be. She looked out the window. She watched Lagos go by, the city she had been born in, the city she had left because it had given her nothing, and she wondered if she had been wrong. Maybe it had given her this. Maybe it had given her this moment, in this car, beside this man, on the way to meet a boy who needed her language to find his father. The car pulled into a narrow street in Yaba. The houses were small but neat, painted in pastel colors, with potted plants on the front steps, and laundry on the lines. The driver stopped in front of a yellow gate. Seok-jin did not move. Ifedayo waited. After a full minute, she said, "It is time." He nodded. He did not move. She said, "I will go first. I will tell her you are here. I will give you a moment to breathe, but you must come when I call you. Do you understand?" He nodded again. She got out. She walked to the gate. She knocked. Mama Ngozi opened it. She was a small woman with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun, a worn wrapper tied around her waist, and eyes that had seen too much. She looked at Ifedayo. She looked past Ifedayo at the black SUV. She said in Igbo, "He is here." Ifedayo said, "Yes, Mama, he is here. He is afraid. Please be patient with him." Mama Ngozi nodded. She turned and called into the house. "Tobichi, come my boy, someone is here to see you." The boy came out from behind the curtain that served as the door between the parlor and the back room. He was small for 9, with his mother's wide eyes and his father's serious mouth and a school uniform. He had pressed himself that morning because he had not been able to sleep. He held the photograph in his hand. He had been holding it for 3 days. Ifdayo crouched down. She said, "Tobchai, my name is Ife. I came with a man from very far away. He has been wanting to meet you for a long time. He did not know about you, my boy, but the moment he found out, he got on a plane and came to find you. He is outside. He is also afraid. Would you like to meet him?" The boy looked at her. He looked at the photograph. He looked at his great-aunt. He nodded. And then he said, in a voice so small it almost broke her, "Will he like me?" Ifdayo could not answer. She could not, because if she opened her mouth she was going to cry, and she did not have the right to cry because this was not her grief. So instead she stood up, and she walked back to the gate, and she waved her hand at the SUV. The door opened. Ryu Sukyugin got out. He walked to the gate. He stopped. He could not go any further. He stood there, frozen, with the music box in his hands, looking past Ifdayo at the small boy in the school uniform standing in the doorway of the small yellow house. And the small boy, holding the photograph, took one step forward, and another, until he was standing in front of the man in the gray suit, and he tilted his head all the way back to look up at him. And he said, in clear, careful English, "Hello, sir, my name is Tobchai, I think you are my father." And Ryu Sachin, the iceberg of soul, the man who had not cried in public in 11 years, dropped the music box on the dusty ground, sank to his knees in front of his son, and wept like a child. For a long time no one spoke. The boy stood very still, looking at the man on his knees. Then he reached out with one small hand and touched the man's wet cheek. He said, "Why are you crying?" Seokjin made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. He said, "Because I have been looking for you my whole life, and I did not know it." The boy thought about this for a moment. Then he said, very practically, "Auntie made jollof. Are you hungry?" And Seokjin laughed, really laughed, for what Ifdayo would later realize was the first time in 11 years. He picked up his son. He held him against his chest, and he carried him into the small yellow house. Mama Nosy served jollof rice with fried plantain and grilled chicken. Toby Chai sat on his father's lap and showed him his school notebooks and his collection of bottle caps and the model airplane he had built from scraps of cardboard. Sukjin asked questions through Ifdayo, in Korean, in English, sometimes in halting Igbo phrases he had learned from a college girlfriend 9 years ago. Mama Ngozi watched them and cried quietly into her wrapper. And Ifdayo, sitting in the corner of the small parlor, translating one careful word at a time, felt a happiness so unexpected she did not know what to do with it. She thought, this is enough. Whatever comes next, this moment, this little boy on his father's lap, this woman finally able to let go of a secret she has carried for 9 years, this was enough. I did this. Whatever I did to get here, it was worth it. At 3 in the afternoon, Seokjin asked Mama Ngozi if he could take Toby Chai for a walk to the ice cream shop 2 streets away. Mama Ngozi said yes. They went out, the father holding his son's hand, the boy talking non-stop about which flavor he was going to choose, the man listening as if every word was a sacrament. Ifdayo stayed behind. She helped Mama Ngozi wash the dishes. She talked with her in Igbo about her mother, about Ibadan, about the strange paths that lives took. Then 30, then 40. Ifdayo looked at her watch. She frowned. The ice cream shop was 2 streets away. They should have been back by now. Her phone rang. It was Siukin. She answered. The voice on the other end was not Sayak. It was a Nigerian voice, male, calm, almost polite. The voice said, "Miss Adelani, please tell the foreign man that we have his son, and we have him, and if anyone calls the police, both of them die. Tell him to wait by his phone. Instructions will come in 1 hour." The line went dead. Ifdayo stood in the kitchen of the small yellow house holding her phone in a hand that had gone completely numb. Mama Ngozi was looking at her. The old woman's face had gone gray. "What is it?" she whispered. "What is it, my daughter?" And Ifdayo, who had spent her life finding the right word in the right language for the right moment, opened her mouth and could not find a single one. The next 48 hours would become the most dangerous hours of Ifdayo Adelani's life. Within the first 10 minutes, She had to make the hardest decision she had ever made: call the police and risk the man on the phone making good on his threat, or do not call the police and trust a stranger with the life of a child she had known for 3 hours and the life of a man whose head she had cradled on her shoulder above the South China Sea. She chose neither. She did something else. She called Director Ha, the man who had hired her in Seoul. She told him everything. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he said, in a voice that had gone razor-sharp, "Miss Adelani, do not move from that house. I am sending a team, tell no one, including the chairman, when he calls back. There is something you do not know about this situation. There is something Mr. Ryu does not know, and it is going to determine whether they live or die. Do you understand me?" If Dio, with her heart hammering in her chest, said, "I understand." What Director Ha then told her in the next 6 minutes on that phone call in the kitchen of the small yellow house in Yaba was this. He had been the personal assistant to Xiao Jin's late mother, Mrs. Ryu, before she died. He had been her assistant since he was 22 years old. And on the morning Mrs. Ryu had been found dead in her bathtub 22 years ago, Director Ha had been the second person to find her body. The first had been the housekeeper, and what the housekeeper had told Director Ha that morning, and what Director Ha had never told anyone in the 22 years since, was that Mrs. Ryu had not committed suicide. There had been a struggle. There had been bruises on her arms. There had been a second glass on the side of the tub, and the second glass had been left there, the housekeeper had whispered, by Mrs. Han, the woman who, 2 years later, became Sewak Jin's stepmother, the mother of his half-brother Min Kyol. Director Ha had not gone to the police because the housekeeper had refused to testify, because Sukin's father had paid her a sum of money so large her children's children would never have to work, and because Director Ha himself had been 22 and terrified and unable to imagine what would happen to a man like him who tried to take down a family like the Rias. He had stayed silent. He had become Saoki Jin's protector from the shadows. He had watched the boy grow into a man made of ice. And he had waited, for 22 years, for the moment to come when he would have to tell the truth. And that moment, he said to If Dio in the kitchen, was now. Because the man who had taken Toby Chai and Sok Jin was not a random Nigerian criminal. He was a contractor. He had been hired through 3 layers of intermediaries. And Director Ha, with the resources of Sunwa's private security, had traced the original payment. It had come from a shell company in Singapore. The shell company was owned by another shell company in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman company was controlled by a single man, Ryu Min Kyol, the half-brother, the son of the woman who had killed Saya Ken's mother, the man who had been waiting 22 years for his own moment. If Dio sat down on the kitchen floor. She had to. Her legs would not hold her. Mama Ngozi sat down next to her and held her hand. And If Dio, in a voice that did not sound like her own, said into the phone, "What do we do?" Director Ha said, "We do what they expect us to do, until we do not. They will call back in 1 hour with a demand. The demand will be that Mr. Ryu sign a document transferring his voting shares to a holding company. The document will be presented as the price of his son's life. If he signs, they will kill them both anyway. Because the only thing more dangerous to Minchial than a brother who controls the company is a problem pushing yourself to figure sad. You are 12 minutes away. There is one person in Lagos I can call who can help you. He is a former Sunwa security officer. His name is Babatunde. He is..." If Dio said. The man called Babatunde arrived at the yellow gate 43 minutes later. He was tall, soft-spoken, with eyes that did not miss anything. He drove an unmarked sedan. He had a phone, a laptop, and a tracker. He showed her the tracker. He said, when the chairman was issued his company phone, a chip was placed inside the casing. Standard procedure for executives traveling in high-risk regions. The chip is active. The phone is still with him. They have not taken it because they intend for him to use it to sign documents. He turned the laptop toward her. A small red dot was blinking on a satellite map of Lagos. The dot was moving. It was heading north, along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Babatunde said, "They are taking them to a warehouse outside the city. I know the area. We have 2 hours, maybe 3, before the next call. We move now." What If Dio did in the next 4 hours, she would never fully be able to explain to anyone, including herself. She got in a car with a man she did not know. She drove out of Lagos as the sun began to set. She watched a red dot on a screen. She prayed in 3 languages. She thought about a small boy who had asked, "Will he like me?" She thought about a man who had wept on her shoulder above the ocean. She thought about a mother who had died in a bathtub 22 years ago and whose son had spent his entire life being punished for someone else's crime. She thought about her own mother, dead at 41, and she thought, if you are anywhere, Mama, if you are watching this, help me. Help me bring this boy home to his father. Help me bring this father home to his son. Help me. At 8:47 in the evening, the red dot stopped moving. It had reached a complex of low buildings outside a town called Ifo, just past the Ogun state border. Babatunde pulled the sedan onto a dirt road half a kilometer away. He killed the headlights. He turned to her. He said, "From here we walk. I have called for backup. They will arrive in 40 minutes. But the kidnappers will call again in 20. They will demand he sign. He will refuse. They will hurt the boy first, to make him sign. We do not have 40 minutes, we have 20. Do you understand what I am asking you?" Ifdio said. Babatunde reached into the glove compartment. He pulled out a small black object. He pressed it into her hand. It was a pistol. He said, "Have you ever fired one?" She said, "No." He said, "I pray you do not have to learn tonight, but if you do, point and pull, that is all. Now come. If this is the part where your heart is pounding in your chest, if this is the part where you have leaned forward, if this is the part where you have forgotten what room you are in, then I need you to pause for exactly 4 seconds and do this. Comment the words, 'I am here,' 3 times in the comments. Once for the boy, once for the father, once for the translator, because the next 10 minutes are going to decide whether they live or die. And I want to know who walked into that warehouse with them. Now let us go." The warehouse was an abandoned cement factory, 3 buildings around a dusty courtyard, surrounded by a chain-link fence with a broken gate. Babatunde and Ifdio crouched behind a stack of rotting pallets at the edge of the property. Babatunde used a small monocular to scan the buildings. He whispered, 3 men in the courtyard, 2 armed, 1 on the phone, probably 4 more inside. The boy and the chairman will be in the central building. There is a generator running. They have light only in that building. We move in along the south wall. There is a side entrance the foreman used. It will be locked, but the lock is old. I can manage it in under a minute." He turned to her. "You stay behind me. If anything happens to me, you run back to the car. You do not engage. You drive away. You call Director Ha. Do you understand?" Ifdio said, "I will not leave them." Babatunde looked at her for a long moment in the dim light. He said, "I knew you would say that. That is why I trusted you with the gun. Now come." They moved along the south wall in a low crouch. The night was warm and the air smelled of dust and old machinery. Somewhere far away, a dog was barking. Babatunde reached the side door. He worked the lock with 2 small tools from his pocket. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside. The interior of the building was a single large room filled with rusted machinery and stacks of crates. At the far end, in a circle of yellow light from a portable lamp, were 5 men. 3 sat on crates. 1 stood behind a folding table on which a laptop was open. The 5th held a thin chain attached to handcuffs. The handcuffs were on the wrists of Ryu Sugen. Sugen was on his knees. His face was bloody. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. Beside him, sitting on the dirty floor with his arms wrapped around his knees, was Tobei-chai. The boy was not crying. The boy was looking at his father with the steady, unblinking gaze of a child who has decided that no matter what happens, he will not look away. The man behind the laptop was speaking. He said, in heavily accented English, "Mr. Ryu, we have already explained. You sign the document, the boy and you walk out of here. You do not sign, we cut the boy's finger, then the next finger, then we send the video to his great-aunt, and then we start on you. We have all night." Sukshin spat blood onto the floor. He raised his head, and in a voice that was hoarse but absolutely steady, he said, I will sign anything. Just let him go, let him walk out of here, then I sign." The man behind the laptop laughed. He said, "No, Mr. Ryu, we do it together or not at all." Babatunde, crouched behind a stack of crates 20 feet away, breathed out slowly. He turned to Ifdio. He whispered, "I am going to move to the right and create a distraction. When they all look toward the noise, you do one thing. You shout the boy's name as loud as you can and you tell him in Igbo to run toward you. Then you grab him and you go back through the door we came in. Do not stop. Do not look back. I will handle the rest." Ifdio nodded. Babatunde melted into the darkness. For 30 seconds there was no sound except the men talking and the generator humming. Then, from the far side of the warehouse, there was a crash. A stack of metal pipes had fallen over. All 5 men turned their heads. 2 raised their rifles. The man holding the chain on Seoki Jin's handcuffs stepped forward, looking into the darkness. And Ifdio, with her heart in her throat, stood up from behind her stack of crates and screamed, in the loudest voice she had ever produced in her life, "Tobchai, Bia, Gabalaga, Bia, Nebe, Ugbue, Ame. Run. Come here." Now, the boy moved like he had been waiting for the command his whole life. He was on his feet before the men had even registered the second voice. He was running. He was running flat out, his small legs flying, his school uniform a blur in the yellow light. The men shouted. One of them raised his rifle. There was a single sharp crack from the darkness on the far side, and the man with the rifle went down. Babatunde. The other men spun toward the sound, firing wildly. Tobchai reached Ifdio. She grabbed him. She lifted him. She turned to run for the door. And then Sakajin, on his knees with his hands cuffed, did something no one expected. He threw his entire body sideways into the legs of the man who had been holding his chain. The man fell, the chain whipped through the air, and Sakajin, with his cuffed hands, snatched the man's pistol from his belt. He did not stand up. He fired 3 times from his knees. 2 of the remaining men went down. The third dropped his rifle and ran for the back of the warehouse. Babatunde appeared from the darkness, his own pistol raised. He fired once. The runner fell. There was a silence so sudden it felt like the air had been sucked out of the building. Ifdio, holding the boy against her chest, turned slowly. Sakajin was on his feet now, swaying, bleeding from his nose and his shoulder, the pistol still in his cuffed hands. He looked at Ifdio. He looked at the boy in her arms. He dropped the pistol. He started to walk toward them. He made it 3 steps. Then his legs gave out and he went down to his knees again, this time gently. Tobachai wriggled out of Ifdio's arms and ran to him. The boy threw his arms around his father's neck, and the father, with his hands still cuffed in front of him, held his son with everything he had left. Babatunde walked over. He examined the men on the floor. He nodded once. He pulled a small key from the pocket of one of them. He unlocked Sokjin's handcuffs. He helped him to his feet. He said, "Mr. Chairman, we have a car, we need to go, now." Sokjin nodded. He picked up his son. He turned to Ifdio. He looked at her for a long moment, and he said, in a voice that shook, "Thank you." She said, "Do not thank me yet, we are not finished." She was right. They were not. The drive back to Lagos was silent. Tobachai fell asleep in his father's lap in the back seat. Sokjin held him as if he was the only thing in the world that mattered, because at that moment he was. Babatunde drove. Ifdio sat in the front passenger seat, her hands finally beginning to shake now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Halfway back, her phone rang. It was Director Ha. She answered. He said, "I just landed. I have boarded a helicopter. I will be at the Eco Hotel in 40 minutes. There is something I need to tell the chairman in person. Do not let him sleep. Do not let him hide. I have waited 22 years to say this and I will not say it over a phone." Ifdio turned around. She looked at Saya Kyujin in the back seat. She said, "He is asking to meet us at the hotel." Sukjin nodded slowly. He understood that there was more. He had been a powerful man too long not to understand that one rescue did not end one war. At the hotel, Mama Ngozi was waiting in the suite. Director Ha had called her from the helicopter. She had been driven over. When the door opened and Tobchai walked in alive, the old woman fell to her knees and praised God in 3 languages. Sukajin sat down on the edge of the bed. A hotel doctor cleaned the cut on his nose and bandaged his shoulder. He did not flinch. He did not speak. He watched his son drink a glass of orange juice and eat a piece of bread and then climb up onto the bed and fall instantly asleep against his great-aunt. Then, and only then, did he look up at Ifdio, who was standing by the window. He said, "How did you know to come?" She said, "Director Ha told me everything, about your mother, about your brother, about what Minkyul's mother did. He has been carrying it for 22 years. He is coming now to tell you himself." Sukin closed his eyes. For a long moment he did not move. Then he said, very quietly, I always knew, I never had proof, but in my bones, since I was 12 years old, I always knew. A single tear slid down his face. He did not wipe it. Director Ha arrived an hour later. He was a small man in his late 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served the Ryu family for 36 years. When he entered the suite, Seok Jin stood up. The two men looked at each other. Director Ha bowed deeply, the deep bow of a Korean man asking for forgiveness. He said, Chairman, I should have spoken 22 years ago. I was afraid. I was wrong to be afraid. Your mother was murdered. Mrs. Han was the murderer. Your brother knew when he was old enough to understand. I have records. I have the original housekeeper's testimony, which I obtained 5 years ago when she was dying. I have bank records of the payments. I have been holding it because I did not know if telling you would destroy you or save you. Tonight, watching what your brother tried to do to your son, I know it will save you and it will save the company. And I am ready to give my testimony. And Seok Jin walked across the room. He took the older man by the shoulders. He held him there for a long moment. And he said, in a voice that was finally free, You did not betray May, you protected me, you waited for the moment when the truth could save us instead of breaking us. Tonight, you are the bravest man in this room. Thank you, Director Ha. Thank you for my mother. Thank you for my son. Thank you. The next 72 hours moved with the speed of an earthquake. Director Ha's evidence was presented to the Sunhwa Board of Directors at an emergency meeting held by video conference at 4 a.m. Seoul time. The board, 12 men and women who had built their careers under the shadow of 2 generations of Ryu power, listened in silence. By the time Director Ha finished speaking, 3 of them were openly weeping. The motion to remove Ryu Min-kyol from all executive positions, freeze his assets, and refer the matter to the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office passed unanimously. The arrest came at 7 a.m. at his apartment in Cheongdam-dong. He did not resist. He was photographed in handcuffs as he was led to the police car. The photograph would be on the front page of every newspaper in Korea by the end of the day. Mrs. Han, his mother, the woman who had murdered Seok Jin's mother 22 years ago, was arrested 4 hours later at her vacation home in Jeju. She refused to speak. Her trial would take 11 months. She would die in prison 3 years later of a stroke. Min-kyol would receive 25 years for conspiracy to murder, kidnapping, and corporate fraud. He would never see freedom again. Seok Jin did not return to Seoul for 2 weeks. He stayed in Lagos. He visited Mama Ngozi every day. He brought groceries. He brought a new refrigerator. He paid for the broken air conditioner to be repaired. He sat in the small parlor and ate jollof rice and learned, word by word, how to talk to his son. Tobchai taught him Igbo phrases. Seok Jin taught Tobechai Korean phrases. They watched football together on the small television. They walked to the ice cream shop, this time with Babatunde 3 steps behind them at all times. The boy chose chocolate every time. The father pretended to be surprised every time. They laughed. On the 12th day, Seok asked Mama Ngozi if she would consider moving to Seoul. She looked at him for a long time. She said, My boy, I have lived in Lagos for 68 years. I do not speak Korean. I do not know how to use a chopstick, but this boy is my heart, and his father is now my son, so if Tobchai goes, I go, but I have one condition. Seok-jin said, She said, I want to bring my pots, all of them. I cook in my own pots. He laughed. He said, Madam, I will charter a plane just for your pots. She nodded. She said, Then we go. He asked Ifedayo to stay 1 more night at the hotel before they all flew back together. She agreed. That night, on the balcony of the hotel suite overlooking the lights of Lagos, he came to find her. He stood beside her at the railing. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, When I hired you 3 days ago, I did not look at you. I did not see you. I thought you were a service. I thought you were a function. I treated you the way my father treated everyone who worked for him, the way I have treated everyone for 11 years. And then, on that plane, my body did something my mind would never have allowed. It fell, and it fell on you, and you did not push me away. You let me sleep. You let a stranger sleep on your shoulder. Do you know what that is? In the world I come from, that is not a small thing. In Ifedayo said, I did not let you sleep because I was being kind. I let you sleep because I saw, in that moment, that you were a person, not a chairman, not an iceberg, a person, and persons need to sleep. He smiled. The smile was small and tired and real. He said, "Will you come with us, Ifedeo? Not as a translator, not as an employee. I am building something, a foundation in my mother's name. It will fund education for children in West Africa and Southeast Asia who have lost their mothers, the way Tobichai did, the way I did. I do not know how to build it. I do not know the languages, the customs, the people. I need someone who does. I need someone I trust. Will you come?" Ifedeo looked out at the city of her birth. She thought about her mother, who had died too young, who had never seen a city she had not been born in. She thought about herself at 15, packing the few belongings she owned into a bag because her aunt could no longer afford to keep her. She thought about every closed door, every overdraft, every meal of instant noodles, every moment she had told herself, "I am building something," even when she could not see what it was. And she understood, in that moment on the balcony, that this was what she had been building. Not a career.
Not a degree.
A door for the next girl who would be where she had been. A door for the next boy who would be where Tobichai had been. She turned to Sokjin. She said, "Yes, I will come, on one condition." He said, "Name it." She said, "We do it properly. We do it big. We do not just fund education. We build schools. We build homes. We change the path, not just for one child, for 10,000. He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "Then we change the path for 10,000. They stood there at the railing, the lights of Lagos behind them, and they began. The story of what they built over the next 5 years would fill a book of its own, and one day, perhaps, it will. The Adize and Yura Ryu Foundation, named for Siak Jin's late college love and his late mother, opened its first school in Yaba in 2026. By 2028, there were schools in Lagos, Accra, Manila, and Bandung. By 2030, there were 27 schools in 9 countries, and the foundation was funding the university education of 3,000 orphan children. Ifedeo Adelani became its founding executive director. She kept the small apartment in Itaewon for sentimental reasons, but she lived now in a house in Yongsan-gu with a garden where Mama Ngozi grew pepper and tomato and small bitter leaf in pots, and where Tobichai, now 14, practiced taekwondo on Saturday mornings and read his Korean homework on Saturday afternoons. The boy was at the top of his class. He spoke 3 languages fluently. He was, his father liked to say, the smartest member of the Ryu family in 3 generations. Sokjin and Ifedeo were married in a small ceremony in the garden of the Yongsan-gu house in the spring of 2027. There were 31 guests. Mama Ngozi cooked the rice herself, in her own pots. Tobichai gave his father away, walking him solemnly down the path between the flower beds, and then walked Ifedeo down the same path, holding her hand the way he had held it the night they ran together through the dust of an IFA warehouse. Director Ha cried throughout the entire ceremony. Babatunde, now head of the foundation's security division, stood at the back and pretended he was not crying too. The chairman of the Sunhwa board gave a toast in which he said, with the wry humor of a man who had seen everything, that the most powerful merger in his company's history was the one happening that afternoon, and that the entire Korean business community would be studying the synergies for years. But the story I have told you is not really about the schools. It is not about the marriage. It is not about Min Kyeol rotting in his prison cell or Mrs. Han taking her secrets to her grave. The story I have told you is about a single moment, on a single plane, at 3 a.m. above the South China Sea, when the most powerful man in the Korean tech empire let his head fall onto the shoulder of a Nigerian translator he had not bothered to look in the eye, and she chose, in that moment, not to push him away. That is the entire story. Everything that followed was built on that one decision. A son was reunited with a father, a mother's murder was avenged, an empire was cleansed, a foundation was born, 10,000 children were given a path, and it all began because one woman, who had every reason in the world to be hard, chose softness, and one man, who had been forbidden to feel for 11 years, fell asleep. There is a lesson here, if you want one, and I think, after 60 minutes together, after everything we have walked through, you deserve one. The lesson is this: the people who look the hardest are very often the ones who are the most broken. The walls they build are not made of stone, they are made of grief, and the smallest act of unexpected kindness, a shoulder, a moment, a word, can sometimes do what 1,000 interventions cannot. You will meet hard people in your life. You will meet icebergs. Before you push them away, look closely. Ask yourself what they have lost. Ask yourself what they have buried. And if it costs you nothing to let them rest for a moment, let them rest. You do not know what your shoulder might be worth to the right tired soul. You do not know what door you might open. You do not know whose son you might save. You do not know whose empire you might quietly, accidentally redeem. And the second lesson, if you want one more, is this. Show up for the children. The world has more wounded children than it has wounded adults, because every wounded adult was once a wounded child who was not protected. If you can be the one who protects, be the one who protects. If you can be the one who comes, be the one who comes. Ryu Sayokin did not know his son existed for 9 years. The moment he found out, he got on a plane. He did not ask questions. He did not hire lawyers first. He did not protect his image. And every child in this world deserves an adult who, the moment they find out, gets on the plane. If this story moved you, if it took you somewhere, if it made you think of someone in your own life who needs a shoulder or who needs you to get on a plane, then do these 3 things for me before you go. Tap the subscribe button if you have not already, because this channel exists to tell stories like this one, and your subscription is the only reason we can keep telling them. Drop a comment and tell me one thing. Tell me the name of the person, alive or gone, who was your shoulder when you needed one. I read every comment. I will write back to as many as I can. And finally, share this video with one person. The friend who is going through it. The sister who has been quiet lately. The father who has not slept in 3 days. Send it to them, because somewhere out there right now, there is a Ryu Syokujin who has not let himself rest in 11 years, and a Tobi-chai who is waiting in a small yellow house for a father he has never met, and an Ifeidaio who is wondering if she will ever find what she has been building. And the bridge between them might just be a 60-minute story shared by you. So share it, and then come back next week. Because we have many more stories to tell, and I cannot tell them alone. From everyone behind the camera, from everyone who walked into that warehouse with us tonight, from the bottom of a heart that does not always know how to say thank you, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a story to the end. We will see you in the next one.